Hello, and welcome to Real Film Snobs. I'm Angela Yeager. I'm pleased to have with me on this episode a new guest host. I'm always excited to have a new person in the Real Film Snobs squad, Autumn Edwards. Welcome to the show, Autumn.
Hello, thanks for having me.
So, Autumn is here today for our special episode on modern Japanese auteurs. This is kind of an episode we made up together after talking in the lobby at Salem Cinema, where Autumn works, about some of our favorite films and started to realize we had a mutual appreciation of Japanese cinema in general. But I feel like through the years, I've been doing this show 20 years. Yes, that ages me. And I don't want to know how old you were 20 years ago, Autumn. Don't tell me. Don't make me feel any older than I already feel. But I've reviewed a lot over the years. Of course, the masters of classic Japanese cinema, especially from the 40s, 50s, 60s. That kind of like what I consider kind of the peak period in a lot of ways of Japanese cinema, with the masters like Kurosawa and Ozu and so many others. And then we started talking about like, oh, well, maybe we should do something about all there's a lot of newer Japanese filmmakers that are actually quite talented, that I haven't, delved as much into their work on the show. So we decided to talk about that and focus on that today. But just to let the audience know a little bit about you, maybe you could tell me how you got into film a little bit, and then what are some of your favorite films of all time?
All right. I actually got into film, I mean, like everyone else, just being taken to the theater by my parents and stuff, and then I fell in love with it. And then I spent a lot of time like online actually playing like video games and things, and I was actually like editing videos there, and I fell in love with video editing. And then eventually I went to college for film, so I have a degree in cinema and television arts.
Oh, really?
And
Okay.
yeah, so I've just been in love, mostly ever since college is when it really took off and got like more serious, beyond just like going to the movies and enjoying the entertaining stuff.
Right.
Um,
And do you make films besides, I know you work at Salem Cinema, but besides working at our beautiful local art house theater, do you make films on the side, or mainly are you more into the critiquing film theory part of it?
yeah, I think I'm more into the critiquing and film theory part. It's not to say I'm ever, saying I won't make a film. I just don't have a great desire right now to storytell. I just have a great appreciation for the art form. So I would love to like share that with people.
Well, then you're a perfect person to be on this show. So tell me us about some of your favorite films of all time.
So, since we're doing an episode on modern Japanese auteurs today, I thought I would take a look at some other Japanese films. Not to typecast myself as just Japanese, I watch a very broad range of things. I watch anything and everything. But I figured I would trawl through and get a range of Japanese films. So, some of my favorites are All About Lily Shushu by
Mm.
Shunji Iwai. It's a very, very beautiful film on many levels, very tragic, very hard to watch sometimes,
I've
but
seen it, yeah. My friend Murray, who goes to Salem Cinema a lot, showed it to me. I hadn't heard of it before, but yeah, until then, yeah.
yeah, I adore that film. I think it's one of the best of the early 2000s. I enjoy Tokyo Godfathers is a film that I watch every Christmas. It's a great Christmas movie. It's just about found family and coming to terms with yourself and your place in the world and um, just kind of leaning on each other, and a sense of friendship and community. So it's a great Christmas film. And then I really enjoy House by Nobuhiko
Mm,
Obayashi. Very,
classic.
very wacky movie. Yeah, very fun. I love all of Obayashi's works though. Like House is a great one to like dip your toes in because it gives you a great sense of his style and his affinities.
Hmm.
But he's done a lot of other works that are like much more serious. They're dealing with much deeper themes and he actually has a particular like affinity for war and anti-war films, really. He has an
Interesting. I
anti-war
think I've only seen
trilogy.
House, so I'll have to get a
Yeah.
list from you of other ones you recommend because I watched House with a group and it was a lot of fun years ago. It's a good movie to
hmm
watch with a group and just like for a party Friday night movie because it's really wacky.
It's so fun. Yeah, I love showing people it because it's like it's usually like nothing they've ever seen before. But yeah, he's done a lot of different kinds of films, so he's really worth exploring more. I like Funeral Parade of Roses. That's a fantastic underground queer film from the 60s. It's just super fun, super stylized. Um, and then I have to give a shout out to High and Low, one of probably my favorite of Akira Kurosawa's films. It's hard to choose, but I
And
think
that's
High
not
and
one that's
Low.
usually mentioned at the very top, High and Low, although I agree with you, it's a great film.
Yeah, I definitely think it's one of his best, though it's hard to choose because he's done so many different kinds
I
that are
know
all
it's like you could
phenomenal.
list, and it's always Seven Samurai and Throne of Blood, like the really famous ones,
Hmm.
but like some of his lesser known ones are just as, if not more masterful, I think. And High and
Absolutely,
Low is a
yeah.
great example.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to dive into our modern Japanese filmmakers, and I think we're defining modern as sort of like 90s and beyond.
Yeah, I
And
think
so
so.
we'll start off with one of the great masters, Cure from 1997 by Kiyoshi Kurosawa. And I've already told Autumn to correct me on any mispronunciations I do. I mispronounce international filmmakers across the board, so it's not just one country I mispronounce. So I'm universal in my mispronunciations. And this is about a detective investigating a string of gruesome murders where the victim is always found with an X carved on their chest, and the murderer is found nearby in almost in every single case, but is completely has no memory of doing anything. Um, and it stars, oh boy, Koji Yakushua. You say it.
Yakusho.
Thank you. And
Mhm.
considered the start of, in a lot of ways, it's considered the start of Japanese horror classics of the 1990s and 2000s, like The Ring and The Grudge. Although this one, it's interesting that it's often categorized as that because I'd call it a thriller, psychological thriller, maybe more than horror per se. Although as it goes on, it becomes more horrific for sure. What I loved about this movie, besides everything, uh, is that I had no idea where it was going. I mean, you think of a classic detective story we see in the States about a serial killer, for instance, and you think, oh, it's going to be something like Seven or Silence of the Lambs. Well, this one has this kind of supernatural aspect that I
Mhm.
completely threw me for a loop. So then by the time I figured it was going in that direction, I thought, well, now that we brought supernatural into this, I have no idea where this is going to go. And boy, does it go in some really strange directions. Now considered a classic and really the film that put this Kurosawa on the map, internationally and brought him to fame. Curious to hear your
Mhm.
thoughts, Autumn.
Yeah, I think it's great that you mentioned Silence of the Lambs and Seven because he's actually mentioned those as inspirations for
Oh,
Cure.
really?
And
Okay.
you can definitely feel that, in the way that it's like the predator prey, the detective and the criminal getting a little too close to each other, getting a little too into each other's shoes. Um, and I think what's really wonderful about this is, like you said, the supernatural element and the way that it's actually downplayed. Because, like,
Hmm.
although it's supernatural, it's very quiet in it. It's not in your face. There's not like ghosts or things jumping out at you or anything. It's very quiet and reserved in what it does. And um, the supernatural element is hypnotism, not to spoil too much, but I think it's wonderful how Kyoshi like brings that in and integrates that into the filmmaking. Especially, I noticed this time around, I'd seen it many years ago in college, but rewatching it this time, what really jumped out to me was like the sound design was a big
Hmm.
one. I love the sound in this film. I think that it's wonderful the way that he has those rhythmic sounds of like, a bell dinging or a train crossing or water dripping that really just kind of lull you into the hypnotic rhythms and, kind of puts you under the spell of Mamiya as
Right.
well. And
Which also ties in with the theme of hypnotism, of course, in the movie. And that's the part that really gives it that twist from your conventional serial killer movie because it's not something that can be easily like, I found the bad guy, right? It's like not an easy
mhm,
explanation. The lead actor we've seen, and he's in a lot of Japanese films, is just so good in this role. As this kind of troubled detective who's so infuriated and not someone who's just prone to believe, you can imagine a case like this is just, it's literally making him become unglued. And so we're also
mhm,
watching his own kind of like psychological destruction as the film goes on, as this case is like eating away at him and destroying him. So I found that part really interesting. It's weird that in so many articles it refers to The Ring and The Grudge because to me it seems so different in that way because it's not a horror movie in any conventional sense or has, like you said, it's also a lot quieter than those movies
mhm,
and more like a kind of quiet, introspective detective movie, although it is very gory in parts. So,
mhm. Yeah, it's very existential, I think.
yes, yes.
There's just like flashes of gore and like, extreme things that I think because of how sparse they are, they really hit you that much harder. The impact is all the greater.
Hmm.
Out of
Definitely.
nowhere, you'll just all of a sudden see somebody's face being peeled off, and it's extremely shocking after having just this quiet, introspective time with the detective as you're just following the trail. And
Yeah.
also that they catch the killer so early, really, and then it's just kind of tumbling down this dark path with Koji Yakusho as he loses his mind, and because of that, it's really hard to say. Like you said, it's hard to tell where things are going because he might be insane. Very even halfway through the film, from the point that he grabs the knife, there's a chance that nothing else in the film has actually taken place when he may
Well,
have
we
killed
don't
his
know
wife.
either, too, because it's
Yeah,
not
we
from
don't
our
know.
perspective, it's his perspective. So that's also
Yeah,
very interesting.
it's
Yeah.
very
So
subjective.
highly recommend, 4 stars across the board on this one. So if you haven't seen Cure, check it out. Great modern classic. So we should move on to our next film, which you're introducing.
All right. So this is a film that I adore by a modern director that I really love and I think deserves more love, even though he did just win um, the best international picture the other year with Drive My Car. This is Asako 1 and 2 by Ryusuke Hamaguchi. Um, I think it's a wonderful film about like chance and I think it's interesting because you can feel the connection between Hamaguchi and Kurosawa because Hamaguchi was actually a student of Kurosawa's.
Oh, really?
He, yeah, Kurosawa taught at Tokyo University where Hamaguchi studied under him, and you can feel the similarities in this because it's a story of doppelgangers and
Hmm.
identity and the unknowability of others and yourself, right? So it's the story of this woman who meets a man and they have a relationship for some time and then he just disappears one day. She goes through some years and moves away and then meets another man who looks exactly like her ex. She has a lot of trepidation about getting to know him because of, the feeling of rejection from the other guy leaving her, but she decides to give it a chance and they fall in love. And then, of course, the ex comes back and throws a wrench in things, and I won't spoil anything from there, but it's one that's, I would say, hard to predict as well, where it's gonna
Hmm.
go.
Big time.
Um, and possibly, depending on your feelings on the main protagonist, it might be infuriating to watch. I've heard that from a couple people, so I'd love to
I
hear your
had a lip.
thoughts.
I did. So I did better with this film the second time. When you picked this one, I have seen it before, so I was like, oh boy. But I also understood why we probably didn't want to do Happy Hour, which is 5 hours, because
Yeah.
Hamaguchi's films tend, some of them are rather long. And so this one is actually about 2 hours, which is short for his films, I think. And because I really like the main character, I liked her, and so I want good things for her, and she kind of infuriates me at the end of the film by some of the decisions she makes, and I think that's sort of the point. And I got that more the second viewing because, and I think it's partially because he sets her up as such this like almost sweet, innocent character. She just seems so well-meaning, and she falls so hard for this guy at the beginning. It's just this instant connection. I mean, they kiss almost within 5 minutes of meeting each other. It's just
Yeah,
like this instant spark that they have. So she falls hard. And so you see her trepidation when she meets this other guy who, other than looking like her first boyfriend, is nothing like him personality wise, right? And he is pursuing her. And she's just kind of like, no, I can't do this. But then eventually kind of gives in and then makes some, what I think, very unwise decisions at the end of the film. And it goes in this, again, a very odd direction. And they're looking for this cat. it's, and there's a lot of places that you just can't predict where it's going to go. Um, I'm curious though, because it does infuriate people, what is your take on that? Like, what do you think he was trying to say about this character and where, you know, why people would make decisions like this, and especially in matters of the
mhm.
heart?
I really enjoy this movie because I think Ryusuke Hamaguchi is a very poetic director, and I think
Hmm.
that you kind of have to read into this movie a little bit to figure out what that's all about and what's motivating her as a character. I think this is a movie very much about trauma, the trauma of like the sudden loss of someone, or he integrates like if you remember the scene with the earthquake and everything, you find later that took place on 3/11, so it's a reference to the Fukushima disaster. And
Hmm.
so, lots of people died there. It was a great national tragedy. And it's a point that, it's about how trauma can be like an anchor point and how you don't really know how it can affect you. And suddenly one day you may think that you've moved on and you've, become this different person, but when you're reintroduced to that, it can snap you right back to that moment. And all of a sudden it's like you have this disassociation from yourself and you're like, oh, which one is the real me, as it were? And you're trying to figure out, like, I love that line that she says where when Baku comes back and she's like, it feels like everything up until now has been a dream, and
Mm,
this is now what's real, even though she
yeah.
was with the other guy much longer. Yeah.
Right, for years, where she had a very short relationship with Baku. So it was really interesting. And do you think there's any symbolism in the fact that his name is from this animal apparently, and that was also one of the points of confusion when she meets the new guy and she thinks he's the same person and she uses the name and he's like, "Do you think I look like this animal?" He's very confused.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure because we don't ever get that confirmed in the film. We never see his
Right.
name written out for the kanji, so we can't get the meaning necessarily. One of the meanings for Baku could be like explosion, though, which is a very common um, recurrence in this film. You have the sparklers, you have the explosion of the nuclear power plant, and then, Baku being in here, kind of just how he blows up people's lives, maybe, I guess.
Uh-huh.
Um, I think that might be it. It's hard to say though because we never get that confirmed. But
Yeah, it's
I
interesting. And
do
then
love that recurring theme of like sparks.
well, and there's also these people that kind of come in and out. She has the one friend who's her friend at the beginning of the film. And then when she moves, loses track of that friend, but then that friend reemerges. And then there's
Hmm.
also the other friend who later on comes back, or she goes to visit him, and he's now very ill, and so that's
Hmm.
another. Um, so there's just a lot of the film's name even alludes to this. These like different parts, the one and two, right? So like
Hmm.
the way these people have reemerged into her life, and then it's almost like a different story now.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, I appreciated this Melville a lot more the second time I saw it. The first time I was getting profoundly annoyed with her. I think it's because I'm not like that character. I'm not like that at all myself. I'm a very
Hmm.
like I know what I want type of person, and she just sort of flails around a little bit, and I was getting annoyed by
Hmm.
her. But then I remember there are people like this, and you have to remember that different characters are different than you, Angela, in the films.
Hmm.
So
And I
yeah,
think he sets it up wonderfully in the beginning with the museum, right? The museum exhibition's title is Self and Others. And, it ends with the picture of the two girls, the twins, and,
uh,
and the final shot of the movie is the two of them on the balcony. It very much feels like a photograph that would be in the museum.
right. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it is a great film. I definitely recommend people check it out. It's also one that's probably a good rewatch, I would say, based on the fact I got a lot more out of it the second time I watched it because there's a lot, and I think that's the truth with all of his films I've seen.
Hmm.
They get better on repeated watchings. There's just way too much going on in
Yeah.
one sitting to often
He's
get
very
everything.
subtle. And,
Yeah,
yeah.
great filmmaker. And all of his recent films, including Drive My Car, I really enjoyed. And as I mentioned, Happy Hour, which really surprised me how much I liked it, even though it's 5 hours and it's just these women talking, and I could have just sat at that bar with them and watched them
Right. I want to be
for
friends
another
with
5 hours.
them.
Yeah, I wanted to just like hang out. I was like, I can't believe, usually a 5 hour movie would annoy me, but I really enjoyed that one. So he's definitely a
Yeah.
filmmaker to check out, especially if you like, you know, really good character development in your movies, because that's something he does really, really well. So.
Hmm.
Okay, well, we should move on.
All right. So the next movie on our list is I Wish. It's by Hirokazu Kore-eda, who has achieved a pretty good degree of international fame at this point with Shoplifters and other things, winning a lot of awards. He's a great filmmaker. He does a lot of stuff around family and children, kind of slice of lifey. But what I really enjoyed about this one, it's the story of a group of children who hear this rumor about two bullet trains where when they pass each other by, the force created by their speed is so great that anyone watching that will have their wish granted. And so these children set out on a trip to go watch this happen and have their wishes granted. And what I really liked about this one is Kore-eda is a wonderful filmmaker, and his strength is definitely, drama and making you empathize with the characters. And a lot of his stuff can be very tough to watch, though, because of that. He can have some pretty rough stuff happen in his films, but this one's a much lighter film. I
Oh
think
yeah,
it's
big time.
yeah, it's very funny. Honestly, it's very, very funny. It's very quiet. It's very touching. It's kind of just like a good time to hang out with these children and watch them explore Japan. And it's like a breath of fresh air to me.
Yeah, and I thought I'd seen all of his films until you mentioned, "Oh, I think I'd like to do I Wish," and I thought, oh, I've never seen that one. How did I miss it? Because I've been into his films since Afterlife, which is one of the, greatest films in Japanese cinema, period, in my opinion. Shoplifters is great. Your Little Sister, which is one of my personal
Hmm.
favorites, and made my top five of that year, and it should show at Salem Cinema. I just personally love that movie. That's also on the more gentle, less traumatic side, also about family. I think he's one of the great chroniclers of families, and probably one of the
Hmm.
greatest filmmakers I can think of in modern times of working with children. He
Hmm.
universally gets great performances from kids. Nobody Knows, which is probably one of his most heartbreaking films. When I
Yeah.
first read that this one was also about kids, I immediately thought of Nobody Knows, which is about these kids that are abandoned and left in an apartment to their own devices. Is absolutely hard to watch. This one is like the opposite of that. These wonderful, carefree children who have wonderfully supportive families who are quirky and interesting, and the kids are all universally amazing. The two leads are played by real life brothers, which also gives it that wonderful sense of authenticity. And there's just all these great scenes. And because one brother lives in the city and one brother lives in the country, you also get to get one of the other things he's really great at is just showing beautiful photography of Japan. And so you
Hmm.
get to see these wonderful shots of city life when they're in, is it Osaka that they're in?
Um,
I'm trying to remember,
I
in the
I think
city
they might make
shootings.
their way to Osaka at some point. I did want to
Yeah,
say that's another thing I really enjoyed is that this doesn't take place entirely in the usual regions that we see in Japanese film, like Tokyo or Osaka or Hokkaido. It actually takes place a lot on this little volcanic island called Sakurajima, which is a real island in Japan. And I've seen like some little documentaries on it, and it looks super cute and fun. And I just love that it is set there, instead
right.
of Tokyo.
And even though they actually have fun with this, which the one kid reminds me of me because I'm a worrier, and he's always looking at the volcano, and he's like, "Isn't anyone freaked out that we live near an active volcano that could erupt at any minute and kill all of us?" And he's constantly kind of thinking about this in a very
Mhm.
kid-like way, but also like a way I was like that kind of kid, so I was like, "Yeah, that's what I'd be thinking
That
about
would
too
be
if I
me
lived."
now. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So just a wonderful movie. I just smiled all the way through this. The performances are amazing. And the adults, unlike a lot of movies with kids, I mean, the kids are the focus, but the adults get wonderful moments too.
Hmm.
Especially is it the grandpa, the older man
Oh
that kind of,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, he's just
Makes the
amazing.
cakes.
Yeah, yeah, it
Yeah.
makes the cakes just fantastic. So,
Yeah.
this one, I'm trying to remember where I watched it now because I watched so many movies this last week. I think it was a little hard to find though. And so people, I think this one I found on Amazon and you had to pay a few dollars, but I wish a lot of, and I always say it Kore-eda, so I've been mispronouncing it. It's not Kore-eda. How did you say it?
Yeah. Kore-eda.
Kore-eda.
Kore-eda. Yeah.
I'll probably say it. I'll just probably say it Kore-eda and say it wrong forever, but I'll try. I'll try to work with you later on saying it correctly. But a lot of his films are surprisingly, considering he's one of the most popular filmmakers in Japan, hard to find, especially
Hmm.
on like Region One discs. Like I was looking up a couple that I thought, oh, I don't own. Oh, Your Little Sister. I was like, I need to own that. It's only on Region Two,
Hmm.
so it's kind of annoying. But luckily, I have an all-region DVD player. So
Me too.
okay, as every film snob should.
It's a
Okay.
must-have. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So we've got just 4 minutes left to do our last film, which is Sonatine by, oh boy, I mispronounced his name. I always called him Beat Takashi, but I might be saying that wrong. Did I say it wrong?
Takeshi.
Takeshi. Hey, I
Takeshi
was,
Kitano. Mm.
yes. Okay. Thank you. And this is a gangster film, or also known as Yakuza. Several gangsters are set to Okinawa to help end a gang war, and instead everything goes horribly wrong, and they end up hiding out at the beach, which is kind of a weird way to describe the plot of this movie. But it doesn't have a plot in a traditional sense. It's a very, it was written, directed, edited, and stars. I'll let you say the name.
Takeshi Kitano.
Takashi. Yes,
Takeshi. Yeah.
and who goes by the name Beat Takeshi as his, like, stage name as an actor. Um, so the first thing I thought of when I was watching this movie, I was like, oh, this is a totally different type of gangster movie. If
Mm.
you're used to like action, if you want to watch Goodfellas, this is not the film. If you're a fan of something like the first film I thought of was Les Samurai by Melville. So like
Oh.
tired gangsters full of existential dread, this is the film for you.
Hmm.
He's the main character. I don't know how many lines he says in the movie, but hardly any. He doesn't talk a lot. He's tired. He's worn out. He's almost kind of ready for death because he's just like done with it all, done with his lifestyle. Um, And then it's I think the thing that's going to be hard for this film for American audiences, and it took me a while to kind of figure out where, the rhythm of it, is that it has this weird mix of like violence and, it is a gangster film and
Mhm.
sort of dramatic moments, but then these weird comedic, almost kind of like dark humor intervals throughout, and
Mhm.
that are almost goofy at times, and you feel
Absolutely.
like you're almost watching a different movie.
Yeah. You can
And I
definitely
know this,
feel
yeah. Go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. I was
Yeah.
gonna say you can
No, go ahead.
definitely feel Kitano's roots as a comedian in this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's the part that was almost hard to, because it is very serious in parts too, because people are dying left and right in this film, right? But then it's very funny in parts, or, like you
Mhm.
said, and he's known for being a comedian. And so, and also known for, having his hand on his films in all these ways,
Mhm.
writing, directing, editing, etc. So this film is considered one of his best films. And I'm curious, I don't know the history of his films as well, so I'm hoping maybe you could educate me, but this one was kind of one of his big hits internationally, I
Mhm.
think.
Absolutely. Yeah, I believe he started with Violent Cop, and then he did a movie called Boiling Point, and then Sonatine. And yeah, I think this was the first international breakout among those. And what I really love about this one, like you said, it's a very different register for a Yakuza film. It's very like art housey. It's a beautiful film to look at. I love the way they use colors, these beautiful blues and greens, punctuated by flashes of red. It's just absolutely gorgeous throughout. And the score by Joe Hisaishi is incredible. He really knocks it out of the park here. It's his second collaboration with Kitano. They would go on to do a total of six.
Oh,
He's
wow.
also done many, many Ghibli movies, so I'm sure even if you haven't seen Kitano, you've heard his music. I just love the soundtrack here. It always feels like it's building towards something monumentous, like or momentous and monumental. It's just constantly you feel like you're on the precipice of something great, and I love that for this movie because you're always unsure of what's going to happen next. Is it going to be greatness or is it going to be death? And maybe they're not so far apart. I don't know.
Right, exactly. That's kind of the thing, is like usually you're rooting for the main character not to die, but in this case, because he kind of wants it, you're like, well, maybe this is a good thing, And there's a lot said unsaid in this movie because the characters don't say a lot. The
Hmm.
part that made me giggle a lot was the gunshots, because he doesn't show a lot of violence, but you hear it off screen. Like there'll be
Hmm.
like a bunch of gunfire all of a sudden. The gunfire has the weirdest sound I've ever heard. It doesn't sound like any gunshots I've ever heard in my life. It sounds like cartoon gunshots, I guess, if that
Hmm.
makes sense.
Yeah, and I like the way he's done that is he's sort of really instead of making it super sexy and fun, he kind of just has the people stand there and just like go like that. And it's just very static shots and it really drives home, I think, the inanity of the violence, especially when it's balanced with that humor. It feels very silly and pointless. Like why even bother shooting each
Yeah,
other?
and sometimes in a small room, like there's that scene in the one women are just hiding, but they are all just standing shooting right at each other. I'm like, and how any of them remain alive, which a couple of them do, I have no idea, because they're all directly just shooting right at each other. No one's trying to hide or doing like getting behind a
Hmm.
table. They're just like shooting at each other point blank. I'm like, how is not everyone dead in this film?
Yeah.
But a lot of fun. Gosh, I can't wait to have you on the show again, Autumn. I will not pigeonhole you.
Okay.
We don't have to
Appreciate
only
it.
do Japanese films. We can do any kind of films, but I don't get to talk about Japanese films as much as I would like. So
I'm
it'll be a
always happy
refreshing
to. Yeah.
change for pace for me. So thank you for being on the show. As always, our website is realfilmsnobs.com. We're on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new episodes. We're on CC Media, Scan TV in Silverton, Corvallis Access Media, all over the radio at KMUZ, KMWV. We have a podcast. We're everywhere. Thank you, as always, to our fabulous sponsors and crew. Thank you very much. And thank you to Autumn for being on the show. Have a great day and great movies.
Bye.
Bye bye.